it's Pete here. Now in this video I wanted to talk about this, which is my Tamiya Blackfoot, which is the 2016 re-release on the ORV chassis. Now this is a fantastic kit to build and I would recommend it as a kit, and also looks fantastic when you've finished it, but this is a very old Tamiya chassis and I have had some issues which I'll be talking about. So if you're mainly looking for something to knock around, then this might not be for you, but for the Tamiya enthusiast, yeah, really good one, and one you really ought to have in your collection. So I read up about this before I built it and everyone was saying to put the MIP ball diff in if you're going to be going with a brushless set, so I did do that. It's quite an expensive upgrade. You might actually notice that I've got a brushed motor in this now. So after quite a lot of testing I decided really that brushless is too much for this chassis and the handling and just the general strength of it, so I'll talk a little bit more about that. Also I did do a speed test of this while it was brushless, so I will show you that as well. Now you might have seen the original test run video of this at the golf course when it was on brushless, and it all looked like everything went fantastically and nothing went wrong, which isn't entirely true. First thing to look at is the drive shafts, which were popping out of the drive cups on the MIP ball diff. So you can see on this side I haven't got the rubber boot, and that's because the drive shaft popped out so many times it was sort of tearing up the rubber, so I've sort of left it off. And what was happening is when the wheel was extended down on the suspension, the maximum amount, it was sort of coming out of the drive cup there. And so what I've done about it is to sort of shorten the travel of the suspension. I'll just show you how I've done that. So on this car, what actually determines how far the suspension can come down isn't the length of the springs. The spring is actually quite a bit longer than that and is compressed. And it's the stops here that actually stop it from going too far. You might notice there's a screw now in there that I've put in. So what I've done, I've just sort of put a screw in there and I sort of filed it down until it was sort of the appropriate height. And it sort of reduced the ride height of this a little bit, but what it means is that drive shaft now doesn't get too near the end of the cup there, and you still got plenty of travel on that, and probably to start with you had a little bit too much travel given the height of these tyres. So that's kind of sorted out that problem. I don't know if anyone else has had that problem, sort of let me know in the comments. And I don't know if you have the same problem if you don't use the MIP diff and you just use the standard kit drive cups and everything. But yeah, I was certainly finding that was an issue, and that happened sort of several times on that first test run and was a bit of a pain, to be honest. So because I'd lowered the back down a little bit, I needed to sort of lower the front a little bit so it didn't ride like that. So that's in the more normal way of putting spacers on the shaft inside the shock body there. There's still plenty of travel with this. So the next issue I had was with body posts. Let's get the body off and show you. So at the back here you can see you've got these very long body posts, and these are made out of that very shiny, brittle Tamiya plastic that breaks quite easily. And what was happening was that the tops would sort of shear off in a crash. It would sort of actually shear the top off, and you might see there's a bit of a modification there. So what I've done, I've got like spare body posts out of another kit, and just sort of cut the end off and I sort of drilled down into the hard plastic bits. And I've sort of threaded that bit of post through there, just used body clips to sort of hold that in place, and that seems to work very well. So I've done the same sort of thing on the front there, so it's just a spare bit of post through there and held in with body clips, and they haven't broken since. So before I'd done this mod, actually what I'd done in the interim was to use the Monster Beetle posts, which sort of go on there, and so there's a slightly different one on the front. And I was using the Lexan Beetle shell, and that did work pretty well. It is sort of tougher using the Beetle shell on this, well, the Lexan Beetle shell anyway. But eventually what happened was a terrible crash where this got hit. I don't know if you can see there, I've got that screw around there, which wasn't nearly strong enough actually, and I've got a cable tie around there because what had broken was actually where the post meets the chassis there. I didn't want to buy a whole new chassis, so I've sort of fixed this up a bit. Really I could probably do with a new chassis for that. And also this brace now is a metal one because the plastic one did smash into about 1 million pieces in that crash. So that all seems reasonably strong now, but I think there is quite a lot of brittle plastic here, so there is sort of a general weakness with this car. Actually, one thing I've just remembered that I've done is put these spacers in. These are the bushings you get in some kits instead of bearings, because the battery tray could do with being a bit wider. What I wanted to do was to be able to thread the battery wire up through here so it wasn't poking out the side. So I've just sort of spaced that out a little bit, and then you can thread the battery plug up through there, and then it's sort of tucked up out of the way, because I never like to see battery wires flopping about the place. Now also with this, with the plastic servo saver, there was huge amounts of play in the steering. You could notice while it was driving, still a bit of play there. It's mostly in the hubs, I think. But what I've done is put a Tamiya high torque servo saver in there. I also put a high torque servo on those 25 kilogram ones because it has got big wheels. This and obviously takes a few knocks. But anyway, it seems to be a bit less play in the steering than there was now. Also a recommended upgrade is putting these parts to replace these. These are from the Subaru Brat, and these plastic ones tend to break. What I'd done initially actually on the kit is it seemed to run smoother to have the plastic piece on there and then put the metal piece on top as a strengthener. But once it's got a bit of grit in it, actually it didn't work so well. So I've just gone with the metal piece there, and that seems to run all right, and it hasn't broken. So that is a recommended little upgrade. You might have noticed in some of the footage I was running these lunchbox wheels and tyres on this, which do work well. They're a bit more squashy than the original ones. One thing is the front wheels will scuff on the steering gear. You need to just put in a little bushing or two at the front just to sort of space the wheel out. You will end up with the front wheel track a little bit wider than the back, but didn't notice too much. So another little thing I've done, this cover here also acts as a brace for this shock tower here. It attaches at the front, but at the back it's only held on with cable ties. Originally there and there, that bit broke, so I've got the cable ties around there. The trouble is it kind of slides sideways because there's nothing really for it to sit on, because they didn't design this chassis with this in mind, I guess, to start with. So what I've done, it's probably difficult to see, but put a couple of screws into the chassis so that this sort of sits astride the screws there, so it can't sort of slide sideways anymore, so it sort of sits there a bit better now. And like I say, I've got these extra cable ties on the side now to sort of help keep that in place. Okay, I'll just show you the speed test I did with this while it was brushless. It sort of demonstrates a little bit why I've downgraded it to brushed. It was pretty difficult to keep in a straight line with the brushless sets. Okay, so it did go 25 miles an hour, which seems quite impressive on the face of it, but I wouldn't recommend it. It was very, very difficult to keep it in a straight line, and on its wheels it's sort of got a tendency to tip over. I did sort of damage the body a bit off camera, it tipped over. So I kind of stopped the speed test fairly soon because I didn't want to damage this lovely hard plastic body. So I think it was at that point I decided that really this thing isn't built for speed. I wanted to run it with this hard plastic body because although you can put the Lexan Beetle shell on, it sort of then just looks a bit like a generic basher. It didn't quite look like a monster Beetle or anything. And also with the lunchbox wheels and tyres, it didn't look like the original thing. So what I wanted to do is just run it as it is, because it looks fantastic, doesn't it? I mean, it's one of the best looking Tamiyas, and it sort of looks good sort of up on the tall wheels, and yeah, I really like the looks of it. But with brushless, it was more likely to be in a high speed crash and brake, and it was pretty unstable, and it would sort of tip over far too easily. So I just thought, well, try it with brushed and see how much fun I can have with it then. So this is just a 15 turn motor that I've put in and just a brushed ESC, and I went back to the golf course of the original test run and ran it, and although you can't jump quite as far with it, you could sort of have just about as much fun jumping around in the bunkers. That is a sort of ideal space for one of these, just a little space with bumps and lumps and sand that you can skid around in. So that's how it is now, sort of going to leave it brushed. I think the plan for this is just sort of run it more nicely like that and not include it in the big bash sessions with the other cars where it might get broken, and say just enjoy it for what it is, which is a very lovely looking Tamiya from back in the day. Now we do wonder, now that this is brushed, albeit a slightly upgraded brushed motor, whether I could have got away without the MIP ball diff and just used the kick differential, because you know, with less power it might be alright. I don't know if these big wheels will still cause the diff to slip, which seemed to be the problem people were talking about. But yeah, I don't know. I think if the MIP diff does wear out, I will try the kicked diff and just see how I get on with that. Right, so I think that's all I had to say about this one. In summary, a really nice kit, but it's an old design, so a few strength issues, so go a little bit easy on it. Okay, if you made it this far in the video, then thank you ever so much for watching. I'll leave you with a bit more run footage, and I'll see you next time.